From the depths of space, the Zeltar descended, their warships blotting out the sun, casting an eerie twilight over Earth's greatest cities. They did not speak in diplomatic terms, nor did they offer ultimatums. Their message was clear. Humanity was unworthy. They arrived like a storm, blinding pulses of energy vaporized entire battalions. Tanks melted in their armor, and jet fighters fell from the sky like wounded birds. The Zeltar warriors, towering figures of muscle and cybernetic enhancements, waded through the chaos with the detached amusement of gods watching insects. They did not run. They did not take cover. They simply marched forward, laughing in their guttural tongue at humanity's attempts to resist. Sergeant Michael Ghost, Reeves watched it all unfold from the ruins of what had once been Washington, D.C. He had seen war before, Afghanistan, Syria, conflicts no one would ever admit to, but nothing like this. The enemy was not another nation, not another man with a rifle, but something far worse. The Zeltar were bred for battle, encased in armor that deflected bullets like raindrops, their eyes burning with the confidence of a species that had never known defeat. Reeves had been a sniper for 12 years. Patience, precision, and control had been drilled into his bones. He had never fired in panic. He had never taken a shot without knowing it would land. And yet, as he lay prone atop the broken remains of a government building, his rifle cradled in his hands, he wondered if this time would be different. Below him, a group of captured soldiers knelt in the rubble, stripped of their weapons, their hands bound. A Zeltar officer, Reeves recognized him by the golden plating on his shoulder, paced before them, his voice a deep rumble as he addressed his warriors. "This is what they sent against us." The alien kicked one of the kneeling men to the ground. Soft flesh and primitive weapons. They may as well have thrown stones. The warriors laughed, their metallic boots crunching over shattered concrete. One of them picked up a standard-issue assault rifle and turned it over in his hands, as though inspecting a relic. He aimed it clumsily and pulled the trigger. A burst of gunfire rattled off, striking uselessly against a piece of fallen debris. The laughter grew louder. Reeves exhaled slowly, adjusting his grip on his rifle. He had chambered around the moment he saw the prisoners, but he had waited, watching, calculating. One shot. That was all he would get before they scattered. One shot to send a message. The golden-plated officer stepped forward, his mandibles curling in amusement as he raised an alien blade over the kneeling soldier. Reeves slowed his breathing. He lined up the shot and pulled the trigger. The rifle cracked, the suppressed shot whispering through the ruined city. The officer's head snapped back, a fine mist spraying from the exit wound as his body collapsed like a marionette with its strings cut. For the first time since their arrival, the Zeltar did not laugh. A heartbeat of silence stretched between them. Then chaos erupted. The warriors spun, weapons raised, scanning the skyline, barking orders in their guttural language. But there was no muzzle flash, no heat signature, nothing to betray where the shot had come from. Reeves was already moving. He slid back from his position, crawling low, staying within the deep shadows of the wreckage. His exit was planned before he had even taken the shot. He counted 3 seconds before he heard the first energy blast strike the building where he had been. 3 seconds was all it took to vanish. Below, the captured soldiers reacted, lunging at their distracted captors. The fight was brief, brutal. Fists, stolen knives, gunfire. 2 more Zeltar fell before the remaining ones pulled back, snarling in frustration. Their arrogance had cost them. Reeves reached a secondary position, settling behind the shattered remains of a statue. He peered through his scope. The enemy was rattled. Good. The battle was not over. The war was far from won. But for the first time since the invasion began, the Zeltar knew fear. Krovlok stood over the body of the fallen officer, his mandibles clicking in irritation. The sniper's bullet had punched clean through the warrior's skull, bypassing armor, energy shielding, and bone as though none of it mattered. A perfect shot, impossibly precise. A primitive weapon had done this, an insult to everything the Zeltar believed. The warlord reached down, pressing a clawed finger to the shattered helmet. He turned the body slightly, studying the angle of entry. The shot had come from a great distance, yet none of his warriors had seen the attacker. None had detected him. A ghost in the ruins. Unacceptable. Kravlok rose, his towering form casting a shadow over the others. His warriors stood in formation, tense, awaiting orders. The air smelled of ozone and blood. The humans had struck back. The humans thought themselves predators. He would correct that mistake. "Find him," Kravlok growled, his voice a deep vibration that sent ripples through the dust at his feet. "Hunt him. Tear him apart." His warriors bowed their heads in unison, then scattered into the city ruins. They would track the sniper, corner him, overwhelm him. The Zeltar did not lose to lesser species. They adapted, they crushed, they conquered. But deep within the shattered streets, Sergeant Michael Ghost Reeves was already moving. He had studied the Zeltar long, before he fired his first shot. Their patrol patterns, their blind spots, the way they held their weapons with the casual arrogance of creatures that had never known true war. They thought themselves invincible. Now they were bleeding, and bleeding prey made mistakes. Reeves slipped through the remains of an old department store, moving through shadows, keeping his rifle close. He had ditched his previous location the moment the Zeltar fired their first counter volley. Never linger. Never engage in a fight you don't control. He paused near a shattered window, raising his scope. The streets below crawled with warriors. Their movements were different now. Tighter formations, more caution. They had learned. Good. He adjusted his aim. 2 Zeltar stood near a wrecked military jeep, scanning the area with their enhanced vision. They were communicating, coordinating, but they were still arrogant. Their neck joints, unarmored, exposed. He fired. The first Zeltar dropped instantly, his body crumpled before his partner even registered the sound. A fraction of a second later, Reeves adjusted and fired again. The second warrior toppled, his last breath a gurgle of shock. Then he was gone. Reeves moved without hesitation, relocating before they could pinpoint him. The sniper war was never about firepower. It was about angles, patience, and control. The Zeltar had power, but power meant nothing if you couldn't see your enemy. An explosion rocked the block behind him. The Zeltar were done searching. Now, they were burning the city apart. Reeves ducked into a crumbling alleyway, breathing slow, measured. They wanted him flushed out. They wanted a direct fight. He wouldn't give it to them. Instead, he left something behind. A single, empty rifle casing. Next to it, scratched into the concrete with the tip of his knife, a simple message. "You are prey now." Hours passed. The city smoldered under the crimson glow of the Zeltar warships above. Kravlok stood at the edge of the ruined streets, his claws flexing as he read the crude human script. The sniper was taunting him. He exhaled slowly, controlling his anger. He had underestimated this one. The humans were weak, yes, but this one was something else. A predator among his kind. Kravlok's mandibles tightened. He would not waste more warriors on this hunt. This was personal now. The sniper had made his first mistake. He had made an enemy of the warlord. Fires raged where the Zeltar bombardment had scoured the streets, turning once proud structures into skeletal remains. Smoke curled to the ruins, thick with the acrid stench of melted steel and scorched flesh. The sniper had been given his chance to flee. He had refused. Now he would drown in the inferno. Kravlok stood atop the shattered remains of a human skyscraper, his piercing gaze sweeping the landscape below. His forces moved with renewed purpose, no longer the careless conquerors they had been upon arrival. This was no longer a war of extermination. This was a hunt, and Kravlok had never lost a hunt. The sniper had taken 3 more of his warriors since the first kill. 3 more perfect shots. Silent calculated. His soldiers whispered of ghosts, of a human demon lurking in the rubble. It was disgraceful. A single primitive soldier should not have commanded this much effort, should not have forced the Zeltar to adapt. But he had, and so Kravlok adapted. He had studied the human's methods, traced his movements, predicted where he would go next. The sniper relied on darkness and distance, on careful angles and quiet exits. Kravlok would take those advantages away. The drone spread out first, small, predatory machines that moved through the ruins like metal locusts, scanning for movement, for heat, for the faintest tremor of breath. They would corner him, and then the fire teams would descend. No more searching blind, no more scattered patrols. The sniper would be crushed beneath a force too vast to escape. Reeves saw the change immediately. Crouched beneath the collapsed frame of a fallen bridge, he watched the drones sweep through the streets with cold precision. They were silent, moving without the whine of propulsion or clatter of machinery. They glided, scanning, hunting, and behind them came the soldiers, disciplined, patient, waiting for the first sign of movement. They were learning. He had expected this. His legs still ached from the shrapnel wound he'd taken hours ago, a reminder that he was not invincible. The explosion had been close, closer than he would have allowed under normal circumstances. He had miscalculated their aggression, their willingness to sacrifice entire blocks just to flush him out. The cost of that mistake was blood. He couldn't afford another. Reeves moved, slow and deliberate, sliding his rifle across the broken ground to avoid unnecessary weight shifts. Speed was useless now. Speed would get him killed. The drones were everywhere, watching, waiting. His best weapon was still patience. And patience was what had allowed him to set the trap. He had spent the last few hours guiding them, nudging them into a kill box of his own making. An abandoned skyscraper, half collapsed but still standing. Its skeleton remains a labyrinth of jagged steel and crumbling concrete. It was the perfect place for an ambush. He reached the entrance just as the first drones caught his trail. They locked onto the faint heat signature of his movement, pulsing with cold, blue light. Immediately, the Zeltar soldiers advanced, weapons raised. Spreading out in formation, Reeves was already inside. The skyscraper groaned under its own weight, the devastation of war making it unstable, dangerous. He moved through the wreckage, stepping where he had memorized, avoiding the weak points. The Zeltar did not have that knowledge. The first warrior entered cautiously, scanning the shadows. Reeves lined up a shot. He had one chance to maintain control. He fired. The bullet punched through the warrior's visor, sending him crashing to the ground. Before the others could react, Reeves had moved again, climbing higher into the wreckage, forcing them to follow. Krovlok watched from below, mandibles tightening. He could hear the battle unfolding, his warriors calling out, the crack of gunfire echoing through the ruins. The sniper was fast, but he was still human, still bound by his need for cover, for angles for retreat. Krovlok activated his communicator, collapsed the structure. The order was given without hesitation. His warriors fell back. Charges were placed. The sniper had nowhere left to run. Reeves felt it before he heard it, the deep, unnatural vibration in the steel. A second later, the first detonation ripped through the lower floors. Then another, a chain reaction designed to bring the entire skyscraper down in a controlled implosion. They were burying him alive. He ran. The world tilted as explosions rocked the floors beneath him. The walls cracked, the ceiling buckled, gravity shifting in unpredictable ways. He leaped over a collapsing stairwell, his rifle strapped to his back, his breath sharp and controlled. A final blast. The building gave way. Reeves jumped. He hit the ground hard, rolling with the impact as debris rained around him. Dust swallowed the streets in thick, choking clouds. His ears rang. His limbs screamed in protest. But he was still alive, and as he looked up, he saw Krovlok watching him through the haze, standing untouched, a conqueror surveying his kill. Except the kill had failed. Reeves gritted his teeth. He was injured, outnumbered, but he was not done. The warlord tilted his head, amusement flickering across his features. "You are not a warrior," he said, his voice a low, rumbling growl. "You are a rat in a maze." Reeves didn't respond. He simply reached for his rifle. Krovlok bared his teeth. The hunt was not over. Dust still hung in the air, a lingering specter of the skyscraper's collapse. Fires crackled in the distance, sending flickering shadows dancing across the ruined streets. The Zeltar stood in formation, scanning the rubble, weapons raised. But there was no movement, no sound, no body. Krovlok's claws curled into fists. The sniper had been in that building. He had seen him fall. The weight of an entire structure had come down upon him. No creature, no human could have survived. And yet, there was no corpse. A mistake. A hunter did not assume a kill without proof. The warlord's eyes narrowed as he turned to his warriors. Some of them shifted uneasily, their confidence shaken by the encounter. They had expected this to be simple. Another nameless planet to crush beneath their boots. Another species too weak to resist. Instead, they whispered of ghosts. The sniper had become something else in their minds. Not a man, not a soldier, but a force, unseen, unstoppable. He had moved through their ranks like a wraith, striking with precision, vanishing before they could retaliate. He had humiliated them. And now, even in a supposed death, he haunted them still. Kravlok snarled, stepping forward. He would not allow this fear to fester. A single human could not defy the Zeltar. This was nothing but superstition, weakness. He raised his voice, commanding authority. "The human is dead," he growled. "We move forward. We burn what remains of the city. The survivors will kneel or they will perish." His warriors did not respond immediately. Their hesitation was small, just a flicker, but he saw it, felt it, unacceptable. He turned sharply, mandibles flaring. "Did you hear me?" "Yes, warlord." They answered in unison, but there was something missing in their tone. The certainty, the arrogance. The hunt had cost them more than time and bodies. It had cost them belief. And then a sound, faint, almost imperceptible beneath the distant fires. A soft, metallic ping. Kravlok froze. Instinct took over, honed from years of war. He twisted just as the first warrior beside him jerked back, a single-hole punch clean through his skull. He was dead before he hit the ground. Sniper. The others panicked, breaking formation, searching wildly for a target that did not exist. Their training shattered, their composure gone. Kravlok did not move. He controlled his breathing, forced himself to think. He had underestimated a human once. He would not do so again. A deep silence stretched across the battlefield. The fires crackled. The wind whispered through broken buildings. Somewhere, hidden in the ruins, the ghost was watching. Alive. The warlord bared his teeth. This was no longer a battle for a city. No longer a war between species. This was between them, and it was far from over.